complications which can happen during surgery, but which will affect our office practice in a very, very big way. These have happened with me in my hands in spine surgery, but mind you, these are two complications that can happen in any orthopedic surgery. Let's look at this cervical myelopathy, clinico-radiologically affecting activities of daily living. Patient needed surgery. The CT scan and the MRI confirmed the OPLL, ossified posterior longitudinal ligament. Patient was falling off his feet, was getting incontinent, was otherwise young and active. He was a young hypertensive, young diabetic. He had history of deep vein thrombosis after a long flight. He had 2 stents 2 years in. He was off clopidogrel, clopidogrel for 5 days. He was an elite businessman from one of the southern states of our country. He had a mobile number ending in 99999. He had a daughter who was in California and who had access to Google much more than you and I did. After a proper evaluation, discussion and counseling, we decided that this gentleman needs a quick in and out job called a posterior decompressive laminectomy. We did the same. Patient was shifted to the surgical recovery. Surgery was done at around 9:30 in the morning. We must have taken incision. By 11:30, 12, this patient was in the recovery. I went to visit him in the recovery, and as I stood to his right, he was unable to see me. I went to his left, and he recognized me. He had maintained his neurology. We were happy. We were going to share the good news with him and his family. But he could not see with his right eye. Monocular loss of vision, post-surgery. What next? This is 2002 or 3, if I remember right. I was unaware of this POVL, post-operative visual loss. Whom do I reach out to? The anesthetist, the ophthalmologist, the neurophysician, the cardiologist, all of them. How do I handle the patient on hand with me? How do I handle the family, the caregivers outside the operating room, and the young lady from California who will call me shortly? The eye cannot see what the mind does not know. I had never, ever seen or read about this sort of a catastrophe. Where had we gone wrong? I had done the patient in a prone position. Was it too much of a head low? Was it an intraocular pressure on the right eye? Was it hypotension during surgery? Was it a vascular accident? Was it venous in origin? DVT tha unko. Was it a latent embolus? We don't know. He was off blood thinners for a short period of time. Was it neurogenic, cardiogenic? Has anybody had the same? I reached out to the other set of similar surgeons. One of them anecdotally had one, but had no literature support. This was my situation. I looked up all I could on the desktop available in the operating room. I made phone calls to all my friends. Time was ticking fast. I knew that this would cost me a lot of money, but what I was worried about was those golden bangles I may have to wear very soon. Life looked very, very tough. I didn't know what to do. Was it the prone position? But it's the commonest thing that we do in all spine surgeries, or most of them. We secured everything in place. We had 4 people turning the patient around. I don't think the neck was sort of cricked during the procedure. Arms were by the side. It was not really hyper-expanded because it was a posterior cervical laminectomy. I'd actually not used a Crutchfield tong, so I don't know where I was wrong. I looked up everything, and there was more literature about Crutchfield causing situations, or one of those tongs causing a problem, but I had not done that. I didn't know where I went wrong. I looked up everything, and we did have all things padded and in place. I did not know what was happening. Was it a complication of the prone position? And yes, I realized that ophthalmological, neurological and myocutaneous complications can occur in any prone position. Ischemic optic neuropathy, posterior and anterior, is known to occur. Central retinal artery occlusion, if happens, can be permanent. And cortical blindness is the worst, but it has telltale signs because there's an external mark of injury. Ischemic optic neuropathy, obesity, this patient didn't have it. Yes, he was male. Was he on a Wilson frame? No, he was not. Was it a prolonged anesthesia? Not really. Blood loss was not anywhere close to 4 liters. Did he have hypotension? Well, my anesthetist claimed that he didn't. Was there an imbalance of crystalloid colloids? As an orthopedic surgeon, I didn't know much about it. Atherosclerosis, diabetes, yes, he did have both. Did he have anything like this on the eye? No, he did not. This would end up with a settled retinal artery occlusion. Did he have something like a cortical blindness with profound hypotension, hypoxia? Well, I would have known it intraoperatively. Was there an arrest during the procedure? No, there wasn't. Embolism? No, I don't think so. Neurologically, yes, he could have developed any one of these, but these were all free. He had no ulnar nerve, brachial nerve, plexus, or a post-op neurology. Did he have any compartment syndrome or ulcers or on the femoral head? No, nothing of that sort. Any or all of these could have occurred, but no, I had only POVL, post-operative visual loss monocular. What did we do? Truthfully, we did not do anything that is available because nothing was available in the literature. We just waited and watched and said our prayers. Did it turn around? Yes, I was lucky. This patient turned around. I had one other few years later who partially turned around. I've just had 2 in my entire lifetime. In the hospital that I work, there have been 10 such instances. The anesthetist has been the same, the ophthalmologist has been the same, the cardiologist has been the same. Have we found a cause? None of the ones that have been reported, but can it happen? Yes, it can. So remember one thing, as Fritjof Nansen said, the difficult is what takes a little time. The impossible is what takes a little longer. So even if something turns to be impossible, just hold on, don't give up. Certain things don't have a cause and may not have a long-term effect. I'm just sharing it with you because tomorrow, please check your patients when they get out of the OT. There are many people who claim that they are blind later, but they don't really share it with you, and later on in today's rat race, we may be in big trouble. The second situation, something even closer to my heart, something that I love to do, degenerative spondylolisthesis, 2005, young lady then, she was a hairdresser. We did a flexion extension x-ray. We did an MRI. शक्ल नहीं अच्छी लगती मेरी, ठीक है. We did an MRI and we did everything that we could to evaluate and have this patient for surgery. And we went ahead and put in 4 screws, 2 rods, and the titanium mesh cages. These mesh cages is what we used at that time. Many of you would have used it. She did well. She went home. Everything looked fine, hunky-dory. Came for a 6-week follow-up. She was good. Post-op exercise looked good. Suddenly at 3 months, she comes with a bilateral foot and toe drop. Gentlemen, I don't think I've seen this before. I've not seen it after. 3 months post-op, your patient comes with a bilateral foot and toe drop. What do you do in such a situation? Obviously do an MRI. This was the MRI. Please see it. Please take a mental snapshot of this and keep it with you forever. If you ever see a post-operative MRI of any part of the human skeleton or the body that you've operated on, which looks like this, and which will glow on contrast, on T1 will look of a different color, will show soft tissue around metal, and will show this large blob or artifact or soft tissue defect, please remember, this is something that you have left behind during surgery. Post-op, was it sepsis? 3 months, how did she not have any problems? Well, was it infection that we'd missed? Was it a pledget, gauze piece, or roller pack? We had done our counts. We used everything radio opaque. Was it reaction to the implants? How did the wound heal uneventfully? How did she have no constitutional symptoms? Have other people had the same? Again, the same way I went through, I was very, very scared of those golden bangles. Yet, I had to go in. I realized that every surgeon can have one of these in their lifetime if they do more than 5,500 cases. Either we've had them and they haven't come back to us, or we've had them and they are not really reported to us. Why? Because there are two types. There's an acute exudative type, which forms an abscess like the one that I had, which caused the neurology, or chronic well-encapsulated foreign body granuloma, which may remain asymptomatic. Why does it happen? It may be related to the case or the OT environment. Case, if it's an emergency, lengthy procedure, sudden change during the procedure, multi-cavitatory, high BMI of the patient, shift in duty of the nursing staff. OR related, if there's poor communication, incomplete count, non-standardized count, non-radio opaque sponges. So what do we do now? Well, you should have barcoding of your sponges. You must use electronic article surveillance and RFID if available. Do we do it in our country? Not yet. Soon we will. The Association of Nurses internationally say that there should be 4 counts. We do 1 + 1. There should be 4 separate counts. And if still in doubt, a CT or an MR has to be done. What did we do in this patient? Well, we re-explored and removed the material. I have shared my failures, and I quote Samuel Beckett, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. We'll all have our set of complications. None of us are immune. Each one of us has a small cemetery. We visit it time to time to pray. A place of bitterness, regret, where we have to look for explanations for our failures. Always be open to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I have shared some of my skeletons from my cupboard. We should come out and share them, because I strongly believe success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. Thank you very, very much for listening.
Thank you, sir. As usual, excellent presentation.